Hey everyone, I wanted to go over the not so exciting news that we got for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, which is set to release on both the Nintendo Switch and on PC on June 30th. And as we went over a couple of days ago where we got the confirmation that Nargacuga would not be making a comeback at the very least in the Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak release, we're also going to be going over today pretty much the confirmation of a couple of other monsters potentially not making a comeback to this version of the franchise as well, directly from the developers, thanks to a brand new interview that we got from ShackNews as well. So huge shout out to them. I'm going to leave a link in the description below for their developer interview where they basically spoke with Ryoso Sugimoto and Suzuki, the director of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, and we got a couple of more monsters that we're pretty much not going to be able to see coming into Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. On top of that, they also spoke about what their ideas for creating biomes and new maps are, so we're going to be talking about that at the later part of the video. And then I think one of the more interesting quotes when it comes to weapon balancing, specifically in the Monster Hunter franchise, that I think I certainly got a laugh when I read it, and I would love to hear your guys' takes on this specific topic as well. So there's three things that we're going to cover in this video, but first and foremost, we got to talk about the monsters that pretty much Capcom confirmed they're basically not coming back as well, on top of Nargacuga as well. So once again, huge shout out to ShackNews for doing the interview, but basically their first question was, I'm curious as to how you decide what new monsters to create and what monsters you're going to bring back, and how do you balance between the two? The response for director Sugimoto and Suzuki went as follows. So of course it's a difficult test to balance the monsters because there's always a limit to how many actual monsters we can add. And one of the design goals is adding monsters that is to make sure that they have some kind of impact on the game as an expansion, and that they have a feel that is kind of fresh and innovative. And more importantly, it's kind of pointless, or there's not much of a meaning to adding monsters if the gameplay with the monsters that we add feels the same as ones that already exist in the game. It's very important to make sure that the monsters all have a different feel and have a different kind of gameplay or gameplay elements to them than the ones that already exist in the game. That kind of helps us decide what monsters to add and which ones to bring back. And just to elaborate further on monsters, this also depends heavily, and it goes back to what kind of appearances they've made in previous games. But it's important for them to be kind of mesh well with the game systems, the unique gameplay elements that come together to give Rise or Sunbreak its feel. It is important that the monsters work well with that system. So pretty much what they're saying here is that if a monster kind of feels like, or acts like, or even motions like very similar to a monster that is already available in Monster Hunter Rise, or a monster that's being introduced into Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, there's very little or almost no chance at all for them to actually be making a return or an appearance in this franchise. So this first and foremost makes it very clear that Allmother is basically not coming back, because it's being flat out replaced by Magma Allmother, this brand new such species of an Allmother, which of course was introduced in Monster Hunter Rise. So that's the first one that I thought of, where they're basically saying like, this monster, if it plays like similar to the other one, we're not coming back. The mechanics are very similar, and of course even the element is the same. So Allmother not coming back, pretty much kind of guaranteed here. The second one that I thought of, and I saw a lot of people mention this as well, is of course Zamtrios. Essentially Zamtrios plays and fights very similarly to Tetranodon, and basically the expanding ability that it has makes its body bigger and all of that. When they're saying that if those mechanics are already available in another monster, there's very little chance for them to make an appearance here. That's basically Zamtrios and Tetranodon to a T. So Tetranodon kind of already replaced Zamtrios, and that seems to be the way it's going to continue. Now, it's not necessarily all doom and gloom. You can look at it certainly in the way that some of the monsters that you might have been hoping for to come back, me specifically with Zamtrios, not coming back, a little bit upsetting. But at the same time, you can certainly flip that on the other end, where you're saying, well, they're stating that every new returning monster, and I say new relatively speaking, every returning monster is basically going to have to be different than every other monster that's available in the game right now. So what does that actually tell us? Well, we know that Shogun Senator and Astalos play very differently from stuff that's already available there. And we know Seragios is with the bleed ability, which was something that wasn't even available into the game before, is also adding something in. And Malzeno is evolving on top of that. So what does that tell us? Well, it means that monsters that we haven't necessarily seen make an appearance for quite a long time can certainly be coming back. This makes me think of Amatsu, the Ramboros, Celta's Queen, and of course, Malfestio. Simply put, Amatsu is like no monsters whatsoever before it and after. Maybe Ibushi and Narwa to a certain degree, but Amatsu is just kind of like one of those really, really unique monsters that they just basically never decided to bring back. And again, if they're saying that uniqueness is the driving factor for monsters returning, Amatsu is one of those. Celta Queen, of course, the fact that there's just two monsters uniting into one to fight together. This was done in like the G versions and Frontiers versions of the games, but when it comes to the console versions of the game, they just simply nothing like Celta's Queen. When you think of the Ramboros, it's just unique. That big spin swipe attack is big, daunting movements, and basically just the way that it just daunts about the map. It's just very unique. Of course, Bambaro is very similar to it, but of course, Bambaro is not in Monster Hunter Rise or in Sunbreak as well. And the last one, Malfestio, of course, is just unique altogether because it is a flying monster, but it's not a dragon. Those are very rare in the game. And then on top of that, it has the sleep ability, which only Somnicanth, basic Somnicanth, has in Monster Hunter Rise. We don't know if any other monsters are going to have it in Sunbreak, but for now, it doesn't necessarily seem like it's being utilized by almost any other monster as well. The same thing can be said about any sort of paralyzed monster, which just right now Volvidon has, and maybe even Astalos. I don't quite remember if it has a paralyzing ability due to the lightning, but again, we would certainly want some of those unique abilities to come back. If they're talking about uniqueness, that is the driving factor for that. In the next section of the interview, they talk about designing biomes in different areas, and the question was posed, what was your favorite part of designing the new biomes for Sunbreak, and what did you hope to bring with the expansion's new environments that we didn't have in Rise already? The response from directors Sugimoto and Suzuki were, in creating new areas for Sunbreak, it was very important to make sure that there was a different field than what the players had experienced in Monster Hunter Rise. And especially in creating the Citadel, one of the important factors in creating this new location was making sure that the kind of motifs expressed in new monsters and the design elements that are introduced with those are also reflected in the designs of the stage, so that players get a unified sense of that motif. Expressing that was probably one of the most interesting parts of creating a new stage, the Citadel. So they follow that up with another question. So it's just making sure that every living thing was connected and had a reason for being there. Was that a purpose then? And the response was, yes, you're right. So basically the level design is something that was been very meticulously planned out for Sunbreak. For example, even how the monsters move thoroughly throughout the environment and what actions they decide to perform. How they behave in different parts of the stage have all been intentionally and carefully planned out. And this is of course very imminent and evident when it comes to Malzeno. Just the fact that he is very potent in the way that he actually moves throughout the map based on some of the clips that we have seen already. He has pretty much a specific arena where he's going to fight. Almost no other monster, we haven't necessarily seen actually any other monster even go into the castle area themselves, where the big podium is at, basically because presumably that is his turf, that is his territory. We see Garangoma kind of has the forest area, Luna Garen has the icy area up on the north side of the map. Every single monster has pretty much their territory. The map has been designed with that from the get-go, and hoping going forward, if there is the jungle coming back, as some of the rumors have suggested, and something that I covered in one of my previous videos, hoping that if they do introduce another couple of new monsters for that specific biome, they decide to do that as well. So not only are you going to have returning monsters there, like Astalos and maybe Tetranodon as well making an appearance there, but hopefully new monsters are going to make that their home, and they have their own home turf as well. Now, there were plenty of questions from ShackNews where they asked the developers different things about different type of topics when it comes to the franchise. The last thing that I certainly want to cover is, of course, one of the more hotly debated topics right now, and that is basically weapon balance. So the question was posed, how do you go about balancing and improving weapon classes between major expansions? What was the approach to deciding if a weapon needs more or less? And how do you even go about the prospect that a weapon might be ruined in the process? So the developer response is very important because people need to pay attention to what they actually think about how weapon balance works. The response is, on the developer side, one of the important things that we strive for to do is to regard to the weapon balance is focusing heavily on the developer test plays and being very meticulous and list up to the kinds of adjustments and kind of changes that need to be made in the development side to each weapon. And to do this, we rely heavily on player statistics and data to make sure that any balances that we introduce don't kind of upset this balance. And that is the key word. The data tells them longsword is the most popular weapon. Do not F with that. Do not mess with that. People like it. People use it. It's broken. Don't mess with that whatsoever. So when everyone is saying that it's because the developers just love longsword and that's basically is a newbie friendly weapon and all of that, perhaps. But what they're saying here is that the data is driving their decision making. And the data is telling them a lot of people play longsword. You know what you want to do to sell copies? Keep giving them the stuff that already works because it's just working and they're going to continue to do that. So you don't want to upset the longsword users by breaking it, by making it bad or making it worse. And you certainly aren't going to buff Gunlance because those people are still going to play Gunlance anyways. So that's it. All the data is telling them, you know, people are playing longsword. We're going to continue to do longsword buffs because that is just the way this game works, because that's how the developers see it. I think this is the more black and white description I can probably provide as to why things are the way they are. And in future reference, whenever I talk about weapon balance or anything like that, I'm always going to arc back to this very specific quote because this is pretty much the clear tell. The changes are not coming because people are just playing the weapons that they find to be just the most powerful, and the developers are not going to change that to upset people from playing those weapons that they already much prefer. But that's about all the information that I want to go over. I'm going to leave a link in the description below for the ShackNews original developer interview. Huge shout out to them for doing the work. And of course, if you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.